As I reflect back over the last couple games this past weekend, 5 of the 6 periods we played pretty well. Our second period Friday night, we got put on our heels for a lot of the period, had to kill a couple penalties off and put us in a real uncomfortable position, but still had an opportunity to win the hockey game, only down 1-0 going to the third period with about a minute and a half, a minute 20 seconds left on a power play. The disappointing thing about Friday's game, we didn't generate a lot of offense. We didn't get a lot of quality opportunities. Talked about that before Saturday's game, talked about a few things that needed to change prior to going into Saturday's game, and I thought Saturday we played a 60-minute game. Their goaltender played well. We created a lot more opportunities. We didn't give up too many opportunities, and unfortunately, we're on the short end of both games. But it's starting to get the feel of playoff hockey, and I think playing against a quality team in a small environment, a small ice sheet down in Columbus certainly made us compete at a real high level. So hopefully some of the things that we learned over the past 2 games we can take in the next 3 or 4 days of practice as we get ready to go up to Duluth.
Mark, you haven't had adversity like this with, if you want to call it that, with this young team. What are you curious about how they're, with regards to this week in practice, and how they're going to react to losing twice in a row after having such a strong start?
I think the things you look for is, how they respond. And as I mentioned, Friday's game, for 20 minutes, we sort of got shell-shocked. Gave up 20 shots and, some quality scoring opportunities, but survived. And, you take the whole package of Friday's game and say, okay, we didn't generate a lot, only lost 1-0. How are we going to respond, especially against a team that was very excited when they left the ice sheet Friday night after beating us. And I think those are the things, as a coaching staff, you look for maybe in individual players or collectively as a whole with a group. And I thought we responded quite well Saturday. And then again, how they're going to respond today at practice and in the next couple of days as we get ourselves ready. So those are things we'll be looking for. After we got beaten against Northeastern, I thought a response, earlier in the year was very solid. And again, I thought the response Saturday, we could have won that game very easily. We just weren't able to do it, but I liked the way we responded. And if we play, like that 60 minutes we played Saturday, that's pretty good.
Have you spoken to Tony at all about heading down to South Korea or given any advice about coaching in the Olympics?
Oh, he's a pretty good coach. Had a lot of wonderful experiences both as a player and as an assistant coach and now as a head coach. Tony and I talked probably 5, 6, 7 weeks ago about some things that, he could try or things that I thought might be important, for him as he puts together the package of things that you want to do off the ice more so than on the ice. He's got a wonderful coaching staff, and the problem with his situation is you don't have a lot of practice time, you don't have exhibition games, and so you're going to have to rely on some of the things that you can do in video session. But mostly it's the spirit of and the opportunity to play in the Olympics, and I think the energy that he'll be able to create within his locker room, I think, will be very positive.
Mark, I know you were in an Olympics as a player, so was Tony. He's been there as an assistant coach too. But is there something when you get on behind that bench for the first time when you're leading a team in the Olympics that hits you? Was there that experience?
I think, again, it's different because I had, 6 months to prepare. You played against a lot of your competition. You knew, you knew your team really well. You were well prepared. I think, Tony's situation is totally different just because, I'm not sure he knows all his players. And so you get off the plane and you start introducing yourself and move forward. But I think the nice thing about this event, it's a short term. It's only 2 weeks. You don't have to play great the whole season. You just have to play well at the right times and against the right competition. And, certainly you have to have a good goaltending performance throughout the tournament. And then you have to have 2 or 3 or 4 guys step up and score some timely goals, and you're able to do that, you put yourself in a position. But I think, the spirit, the opportunity to wear that USA jersey for these players who, 5 or 6 months ago weren't even thinking about the Olympics. It wasn't even on their radar screen. And all of a sudden, the NHL decides not to go, and all of a sudden you get a phone call from, the late Jimmy Johansson that you're going to be on the Olympic team going to South Korea. I mean, if I was a player and I was sitting in their shoes, I would be really excited. You read some of the articles, with Brian Giunta and a couple of the other players that got selected. I mean, they're going to be excited. They're going to be fired up. A lot of them have played in NHL. They have NHL experience. Other players have international experience. The hard part is, what's your competition going to look like? Because everybody's sort of in that same boat where, they're putting their teams together amongst players. The unknown is, what team Russia is going to bring. So there's a lot of things that I think, as the tournament starts to unfold and teams start to play, they start to showcase themselves. And as a coaching staff and the group that Tony's got together, it's going to be important those 3 or 4 or 5 days as the tournament starts to get a feel of what they're up against.
Mark, your league this year has been different. Usually and honestly, it's been Minnesota, Wisconsin, Minnesota. Duluth's been in there, but now Ohio State's coming along. I think Duluth's better. Bemidji gave you fits, and then Mankato goes and beats them. Can you explain what this league has been like this year?
All I can explain is what we're up against. Teams always play their best hockey. I mean, Bemidji played very well against us. Ohio State, if you're in their camp, having been beaten twice up here, having coming off a disappointing weekend, the weekend before we played them against Duluth, losing a couple games after beating Minnesota twice at home and having success there. The one thing we see is very competitive teams against us. A couple of freshmen for Ohio State have had, very successful years. They've scored a lot of goals for them, which, has helped them win games. Their goaltender was picked preseason to be the player of the year in the league, and so they have, a couple things in place that have done well for them. And then it's just a matter of getting out there and executing and, scoring some timely goals, which they've been able to do. And so, the last 4 games of the season, the last couple of weekends here, Duluth's playing for home ice. They've got things to play for this weekend against us. And so Minnesota's on a bye weekend. Duluth was on a bye weekend. So you hit these teams at certain times in the season. But, if you're going to be successful, you have to play a certain way, and you have to execute on the ice, and your penalty killing and power play have to be effective. And so, no different than earlier in the year. But I think from top to bottom, it's competitive every night. It's not a given. And so as well as Bemidji played against us, they walked down to Mankato Friday night and lose to Mankato. So it's an interesting league, and certainly a lot of the teams are playing their best hockey and have improved over the course of the season, which makes the last couple of weekends and certainly our playoffs that much more interesting.
How big of a change is it for your D-corps to not have Michaela Gardner back there? And do you have any idea of when she might be able to be back?
She won't be back in the near future, and certainly if you take her out of the lineup, which she hasn't played the last couple, games, last 3 to be honest with you. And so, offensively, defensively, power play, penalty kill. I mean, you're taking a big chunk of ice time and having it put on other players' shoulders. So, the first game she missed, we went with 5 defensemen and had success. This past weekend, we moved Maddie Rowe back and played with 6 defensemen. And, this weekend we're going to have to decide if we're going to do 5 or 6 and make that decision as we go along. Sustained another injury late in Saturday's game, and, that player is not going to be available, I'm sure, this weekend. So, again, you got to tweak a couple things, and can't control those type of things. You just have to take the next player, put her in that position, and give her an opportunity and move forward.